Okay. Well, at this point, it does say that we've been recording for 16 whole seconds.
I see that.
So, yeah, how that plays out,
Yeah.
there'll no doubt be an appropriate Camtasia edit.
Hmm.
Some of this, Dan and I were just discussing, maybe owing to a somewhat, we got the maritime internet factor
Hmm.
working translocation.
Yeah.
And normally that would have been sort of supplanted by much more robust BC, internet. But here it's just working against it in a different way. It's like maritime, quasi weak internet to
Hmm.
maritime quasi weak internet. So as we were just literally discussing in this lead up to episode number 13/14, because I realized episode 0 counts as technically our
Yeah.
first episode.
The pilot.
Yeah, so I guess now, like last time, we were actually at a baker's dozen,
Mm.
so now we're at a baker's dozen plus one.
Ooh.
Yeah. So anyway, at this point, the pre-show ramble has well ensued, and I can tell
Hmm.
by the people here that it's not catching up with me. There's a delay in the visual and the audio, which is
Yeah.
a little disconcerting, but I guess that's easily remedied if I just don't look at the browser while the recording is going on, which might not be a bad idea. As you can see, in an urban location.
Yes.
Yeah, Dan, why don't you tell us what the episode's about and how you've been doing generally, pal?
Well, I've been doing pretty well. It's the end. Officially, yesterday was officially the first day of fall, which, after a rather sort of hot, sweaty summer, I welcome the temperatures in the teens, if you know what I mean. And yeah, all in all, been doing well. I've got a little bit of vacation coming up soon that I decided to take just for, take a week off.
Nice.
Before things get busy again in the fall with work. Yeah, so doing okay. Oh yeah, also playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3, which is basically, what if they put Dungeons and Dragons in a video game console? Anyways, as far as our topic goes, I thought this week it might be fun to talk about some of our favorite compilations. Just because, that can cover a lot of different bases. And sometimes you get artists that they might not have a full album out, but they had just put out a couple songs here and there that still are very memorable, that show up on these comps. And they can be really great snapshots of like places and times in the scene, if you know what I mean. And yeah, so, and actually I realized in the time since I picked out this topic, or thought this topic, and we record, there's been a couple, like one of my picks has had a 30th anniversary and some other ones have had some kind of significant things happen in relation to them. So yeah, anyways, I thought it might be a fun topic to talk about. So anyways,
that sounds
all
fantastic.
Right.
But first I got to ask, because a few questions from your general preamble. Do you have any music related concerts or goings on during your work off? Do you have any period?
I had been planning on taking a trip to Montreal, but to go see MS Paint, but it doesn't look like that might happen just because, a couple life things,
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
No, fair enough.
But I feel like, even though we're sort of getting more to the fall, it seems like, there's a lot more live shows happening that seem kind of interesting. I wasn't able to make it out to it, but here in Halifax, it was actually a show at the York Redoubt Historic Park, National Park. Just where some bands played in York Redoubt in Halifax. There's a lot of these old World War II era bunkers down by the ocean. And a bunch of bands
in the Maritimes, man. That's
exactly. So there were a bunch of bands that took some generators out there and played a show. I've played shows out. It's really fun. I've played shows out there in the past. The last band that I played in probably about a decade ago, this band Forlom, we played a pretty memorable show out there. Just with like I think everything was powered by a boat battery that someone had brought on like a bike, like on a bike trailer out to this like World War II bunker in the middle of nowhere that's like covered in graffiti and just looks like, an action movie set or something. Like, and
Highly dangerous and highly illegal. Do not
exactly,
go
but
breaking bylaws, kids,
yeah,
and you may potentially, if there were a fire in a crowd due to a malfunctioning generator,
exactly.
none of your
You
poor
know,
asses would be insured, and you'd be at
mhm.
the mercy of the Canadian health system. But
Yes.
also punk rock and
Yeah,
fucking rock on.
exactly. So
So,
yeah, there's been, just things, a lot of things like that starting to happen around Halifax too. So, I might get out to catch something. I believe I heard you have a concert coming up that you're pretty excited about.
man, I got 2 concerts coming up. Just
Yeah.
this afternoon, like literally 3 hours, ago, earlier. My uncle, my awesome uncle Corey,
Hmm.
gifted a couple of tickets to Jim Cuddy and Sons at the
Oh,
506 Container
nice.
Village.
Oh,
I
nice.
friggin' speaking of our last, episode where we kind of
Hmm.
focused on outside of, guitar-oriented music or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I am a huge fan of Blue Rodeo. I'll be the
Oh,
first to
yeah.
admit that. Completely uncheesy, alt
Hmm.
country or, like I know it's like mainstream kind of just folk music, but I think
Hmm.
that's part of the charm. And I actually, like yesterday evening, even I was hanging out with somebody and we were actually listening to a Blue Rodeo record. And then my
Nice.
uncle today, he's just like, yeah, so we can't go. Do you want the tickets? And I'm like, yeah, I think I would like to see Jim Cuddy at the 506 Container Village. So if you haven't been to the 506 Container Village, you really need to go. I recommend it on anybody who happens to be within spitting distance of St. John.
Hmm.
And my last thing here before Dan tells us about his number one pick, which I'm totally curious about, is that as Dan referenced, Tommy Stinson from The Replacements is going to be playing. I mean, he's done The Replacements like about a third of what he's done actually,
Hmm.
and he spent more time, like in terms of years on payroll, getting actively paid by Guns N' Roses. As a touring member of Chinese era democracy, Guns N' Roses. Like that was like a 16-year
Yeah.
gig for him that only
The
really ended.
Axel with braids era.
Right. Well, and like they had just weirdness. They had like a Buckethead, this guy with who
Oh,
plays with
yeah.
a PFC helmet.
Hmm.
They'd come out and like play like a one public gig every 5 years, like at the MTV Video Awards, and
Yeah.
like yeah, it was just like so strange. Where they'd have movie on like a movie soundtrack, like End of
Hmm.
Days or stuff like this, and then now I mean friggin' Axel Duff and friggin' Slash, they played Moncton, and I didn't bother going. I could have easily
Yeah.
gone, and I was just like, yeah, thanks but no thanks. So, but Tommy effing Stinson, is going to be playing at Fredericton, the capital of all places, a
Yeah.
small, pretty intimate venue, which can also get
Hmm.
crowded, and it's going to be friggin' dope. He's also playing Charlottetown. He's going out of his way to play
Yeah.
Charlottetown and your city, Halifax. So,
Yes.
FYI, dude. And with
Mm.
that, I'll just leave it to Dan to lead us off on this topic here.
All right. So, yeah, my first pick is a record that I actually bought used from a guy named Nick Oliver in Fredericton
I
when I
remember,
was
yeah.
probably 18 years old. And Nick was the person who he hosted the Sunday evening punk rock show on CHSR when I first started listening to it. He was also the drummer in Neighborhood Watch originally, and like during their original sort of 80s run. And he was afterwards, he was a major figure in the electronic music scene in Halifax and in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick as well, under the name DJ Nonsense. And I think he still does stuff every once in a while in that regard. But anyways, he was selling off a bunch of his like classic punk records, and I was just intrigued by this double LP with a huge 60-page book, like 60+ page booklet that came in it, with like just a murderer's row of early 80s like punk hardcore greats. That's the International Peace Benefit compilation normally sort of usually in shorthand just referred to as the PEACE compilation, because it has the acronym PEACE on the cover, which stands for Peace, Energy, Action, Cooperation, Evolution. And what it is it was released by Dave Dick. It was a co-release by Dave Dichter from the band MDC and the folks from Maximum Rock and Roll, circa about, yeah, it was 1984 was when it was released, and it's 55 bands from I think like 20 or 30 different countries. Well, there's 30 bands from North America and 25 bands from the rest of the world, basically.
Whoa.
But like they made a point of like including, like, there's like, it was one of the big things about this compilation is the fact that like they put so much work making sure that like if they could only get like one band from a country, it was like the best band from that country. And like, like it's just, it was wild to me that there was a compilation that came out that was like, had like the Dead Kennedys, the Butthole Surfers, like Crass, DOA, like all of these like MDC bands like that, like while they were active bands all getting together, and then having like, bands like Cheetah Chrome Motherfuckers and Negazione from Italy, and like the Upright Citizens from Germany. And one of the big things about this compilation was it was the world's introduction to the band Gizem from Japan, who were like the first big Japanese hardcore band to really break out in North America. And that's actually one of the reasons this has sort of come up in sort of people's reminiscences on the internet a lot lately, because Sakevi Yokoyama, the singer from Gizem, just passed away recently, and he was kind of like almost like Japan's Gigi Allen, but with more like just like more straight up violence than just like less feces and more flamethrowers, basically, and like open threats of murder to people like working at stores selling like bootleg Gizem merch and like stuff like that. And like he definitely had some like, legit criminal charges related to like assaults and things. And kind of like, is maybe not the greatest guy in the world, but like Gizem were an intense fucking band. And their song Endless Blockades is the second song on the album, and it just like, I can't remember, I think it's like, yeah, and it's like Articles of Faith, I think, are the first band on there, and they're like, pretty like decently well known like Chicago band. And then like this like crazy noisy like Japanese like just wild man like screaming like in this weird Cookie Monster voice about endless blockades for the pussyfooter like comes out. And then yeah, it's like 55 songs, and they made a point of like, there's only one act from Africa on there, but they made a point of finding like this like anarchist spoken word artist from South Africa, and, like, including one of their songs on it, so they could make sure that like, as many places as they could were represented. And it's like I said, it came out in 1984. 55 bands. It's been reissued a couple of times. The original reissue is one I would not recommend, because one of the great things about it is like I said, it's one of the, you can tell it's probably one of the reasons, one of the factors of MRR being involved is, like I said, there's like this 60-page zine that comes with it, basically, that had like interviews. Like each band gets a page where like some of the newer band, like some of the more like not as well known bands, like there's this really great kind of like moody, almost like post-punk type band from Boston called The Proletariat that I'd never heard of until I heard this comp, and like that got me going out and searching their stuff. But like they had like an interview with them, and like, just like each band has a page to like a chance to either like have a little thing about their politics or like the lyrics of the song or whatever. And yeah, it's just really cool. And also one of the bands on there is Zero Defects, which is the band that, I don't know if you're familiar with Brad Warner, the like Buddhist writer.
What?
Yes, who's written a lot of books about like punk rock and Buddhism. Who also has like had a day job career in the like Japanese kaiju movie industry for a long time. Zero Defects is his old band that he ended up getting back together later on. But like I ended up, when I read a bunch of his books, like sort of later on in life, and he mentions like, yeah, I lived in Cleveland, and yeah, I played in this like crazy hardcore band called Zero Defects, and I was like, I know that band. They were pretty wild, you know. They had a pretty wild song on this like double LP. Um, but anyways, like I said, it had a couple reissues. There was a CD reissue in the '90s that is not recommended. It was labeled New Red Archives. Read it, did it, but they didn't re-include. They didn't include any of the like supplemental stuff. Like there was no booklet or anything. And they tacked 5 songs. It was just like a sampler of other artists that were on their label at the time, including like Anti-Flag, which puts, you know, in retrospect, even more of a stink on it.
Lame.
But anyways, in 2020, Dave Dichter, who was the person that released it in the first, put it out in the first place, did an official like digital reissue, and with some, you know, a limited vinyl release as well, and with the money going to like all funds from it going to like mutual aid, community mutual aid groups during like the initial COVID lockdowns, which you know, I thought was pretty cool. And like I said, it was just like this. It's wild to me that someone was able to put such a comprehensive like just sample of like this was everything going on in like punk rock at the time, where like I said, the established bands on there, like you get like the Dead Kennedys when they're still a band, and the Butthole Surfers when they were still like, you know, when they were an early band, and like yeah, like DOA and Crass and UK Subhumans and all these like more established bands, yeah, with like, you know, Zero Defects, and like there's a band from Ottawa called Porcelain Forehead that ended up getting some of their stuff reissued later on, like much later on, but we're still kind of like one of those like real like collector's obscurity kind of bands for a long time. So, you know, I just thought it was really cool. Like when I bought this record, I just thought it was really cool to just get such a huge slice of just everything going on in punk at the time. And like later on, like, yeah, I'm wearing a Los Crudos shirt now, and like they covered one of the bands on this compilation because it was their first time they heard like a hardcore band singing in Spanish, which was this band Los Violadores from Argentina, who had a song called Via do Pateticos, which I'm murdering the pronunciation of. That's Pathetic Old Folks, that Crudos ended up covering on their one full-length record that they put out in like, yeah, in the late like mid 90s or whatever. But anyways, yeah, like I said, that was just, unfortunately, I don't have a copy of it now anymore, but it's one of those like I said, it's available digitally now, like by the person that released it originally, and or one of the people that released it originally. And yeah, I just thought it was like just a really cool compilation that just covers so much stuff from all over the world that just like, you know, I probably never would have heard of otherwise. Which is like, that's one of the, you know, great things that a compilation can be.
Yeah, no, man, that's totally awesome. Everything you said, you described there made it sound interesting to me. I'm just impressed because that sounds like it was like a legit release on the part of all the bands who were represented on it. Because if it's just something where he's like, oh, well, I have this friend of a friend who has access to these tapes and I can just, you know, pastiche this thing together. But it sounds to me like the person who did it was actually, you know, involved in something very legit, right? The MR&R friggin' thing. Man,
exactly.
The social archivist or whatever in me wants to like just go back and like unpack bundles of that. And yeah, man, that's absolutely. Maximum R&R is actually done now. Are they not?
It is. It's done as a print. It's done as a print website, and like, you know, you say cultural archivist. They were literally for years. They maintained the physical archive of like the most definitive physical archive of punk releases that there was in one place.
Yeah, exactly.
Just through their, you know, because you had to get something reviewed in the magazine, you had to send 2 copies. One of which went into their library, the other of which went home with the person that did the review as, you know, a thank you for writing the review or whatever. And so, yeah, they maintained, and they still do, they still have the website, and they still do the radio show.
Okay.
Which has songs submitted by bands from all over the world. Like, sort of in the spirit of this compilation still in some ways, that like, I follow, like, if you follow their socials pages, they'll give you, like, they'll do a little rundown of, like, because they have kind of like a rotating group of hosts that will, like, they'll each put together like a little list, like focusing on different things, whether it's like stuff from demos or like stuff from like a certain area. But like their radio show is still a going concern, which I think is really cool. But
So
they don't
man,
have that. I don't think they maintain that physical archive anymore, unfortunately. Like I think
can
that
you
was sold off.
since to capitalize on this learning moment, as we say in my
Yeah,
line of work, would you be so good as to perhaps put a 2-sentence paragraph in your notes to that effect, possibly
I will.
with appropriate links and or any MRR videos?
Oh,
Just
for
a
sure.
very quick digression before I get into. I'm going to do a quick 2-piece on mine, a
Okay.
couple of these records, but just
Hmm.
the last like conscious kind of thing I have in mind from M&R was when Matt Gay's band in Toronto with Kate Harrison got
Yeah.
reviewed. They put out a CD, and I'm sorry, I don't remember like the name of the band they were operating under at the time. So Matt or Kate, feel free to get in touch with me. But they had they had this ace drummer with them too. Friggin', it's killing me that I don't know this. But anyway, they got their CD really negatively reviewed in M&R, and one of them shared it on their social, and it's just like, man, it was just like the most mean, nasty spirited, just
Mm.
2-sentence, like, but still, I mean, it was in
Yeah.
there, right? Respect, So,
Hmm.
so for mine, I just kind of grabbed a whole bunch out of my boxes of when I had the means and capability to buy obscene amounts of records on the regular.
Yeah.
And so some of them I'm going to speak to in the notes, but then also I'll speak to some of them here as well as in the notes.
Hmm.
So one of these, just on the historical tip that I got when I finally did like a 9-order record order from, what do you call it, Discord?
Ah.
Yeah, flex your head, right? So this is like, I don't need to necessarily track down the Teen Idol's first
Mhm.
7 I don't necessarily need to actually, I'm sure government issues really worth getting into.
Oh yeah. They are for sure.
Void, I really like the Void, and I own one of their records, one of their
Yep.
12. So it's nice to see something on there. Okay, but like Iron Cross, Artificial Peace, Deadline, Glory, I'm sure they're great, but this may be the only time that I actually get to own any of that. So that's, out of the two I'm going to sort of throw out there, that's the first one. Anything that sort of resonates with you off that particular compound?
It's funny because I actually have a different Discord comp that I'm going to talk about later.
Oh, good. Well, there's no escaping it if we're doing a comp thing on this show, right?
But like that's definitely one that, like, I mean, that was almost on my list as well. And some of that stuff, like, yeah, Iron Cross are not for me, but Crucified is one of those like sort of tongue-in-cheek faves of mine, I guess. Just because I know a few other bands have covered it. It's very much a like oi oi skinhead kind of anthem, but like, yeah, like that's just one of those like foundational texts of the genre, like.
So if we're talking about historical sort of order comps, such as you kind of described with your sort of international documentation, this is one thing off of one record label off of one scene, but wow, like did that just one scene become so influential and in such a multitude of friggin' ways, right? So the one that I'm going to pair that with, another local-ish sort of pairing, if you will. This is something I discovered since moving back to St. John. I can't remember if I got this at Backstreet or Second Spin.
Oh yeah.
But this is it's getting mangled by the filter here. But Punk Canada Volume 2 is what we have here.
Yes.
And I'm just throwing that out there because I think it's really interesting. I'm not going to own it, listening to it. I've only listened to it probably 1.5 times so far. But it's one of those things where I'm just like, I see it, and I'm really happy it exists on general principle, And it's like, I got to be honest, I haven't heard okay, so what have I heard on here previously? I've heard of okay, so the Dayglow Abortions is on here with a lovely tune, which is no doubt artfully rendered, called "Choking on My Puke." And Neighborhood Watch.
Yes,
Okay,
Neighborhood Watch are
Neighborhood
on there.
Watch.
That's yeah.
Yeah, from 1984, mind you. So this is like decade spanning,
Mm.
as well as being representational of
Yep.
various themes, right? So they got a thing on there called Tanks Kept Rolling, which I wonder if
Mm-hmm.
that's a little riff to Train Kept Rolling. Maybe not. And one other thing here that's just kind of, I'm just like looking at it, that's Terminal City Rats. They're from Vancouver. That could be from St. John, I suppose, from the description of it. Armed and Hammered. Okay.
They've Armed and Hammered have been around. That band's been around for easily 30 years.
From 1988, this recording
Yeah.
from. So I'll just.
Yeah, they've been around for. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, man, to me, that's like a good use of like getting old tapes and pastiching them together and repackaging them in such a way that is interesting and relevant for the present moment. Anybody who's interested, it's like I could go friggin' dig some of this stuff up on like, friggin' Bandcamp or whatever, but it's so much nicer for the sake of having a nice object, if you will, to just be able to throw it on vinyl and let her roar from a reasonably okay speaker, right? It's kind of a different experience, if you will, since there's no way in hell I'll be able to see any of those bands probably ever, except probably 4 Dayglows, who I know as per like street posts in Kamloops, BC, at least as of a year and a half ago, they're still a going concern. So.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, speaking of concerning, what's your number 2, pal?
Oh, I just had one quick point about that Punk Canada. I think they're up to volume 3 now, but I don't know if you remember in the Montreal episode how I had to give kudos to Paul Gott from the Ripcords.
Yes,
and
definitely.
His sort of his social media group organizing his Punk Canada Facebook group that he basically added everybody he'd ever met at a show at.
I distinctly remember that, pal. Yeah.
Exactly. Anyways, so that series of compilations came out of that Facebook group.
Oh,
where every once in a while there'd be a thread like, hey, look, who's in a band lately, and like Paul Gott has been trying to like promote Canadian punk bands for decades now. Like that's pretty much what he's been doing, like between like his old zine On Guard Quarterly, his old record label, like he's tried to like help sort of smaller bands get heard. Awesome. He just basically like get folks that were participating in this group to like contribute songs by their bands every once in a while, and then they'll put together like a new, whenever they've got however many, they've been putting out a new volume of the compilation. So it's been pretty cool. But anyways,
that is wicked. I'm really glad that I guess maybe subconsciously, maybe somehow that snuck its way in through my brain and manifested in purchasing that, or more likely it was just like, wow. And I gotta say, it really pleased me to be able to buy it at a locally owned record store for like $20 plus tax. I mean, come on, man, come on. That speaks to, I guess, like the accessibility now of vinyl format, because I mean, I just have to assume that there's almost no profit margin for the people putting it out. So, like, for the materials to have gone down to the fact that all in terms of their process and giving the store what they need to keep it on their shelves, whatever, to be able to sell it at that low a price point. I mean, the production cost must be, nice and low on making affordable, reasonably playing vinyl. To me, that's a nice holdover from the industrial era economy that I can sort of hold on to in tumultuous times such as these. So now, really, for real,
For
speaking of
real.
tumultuous times. What's your number
Yes.
2, Al?
All right, I'll do my 2 and 3 as a twofer here,
Please, yeah,
just for
let's do
time's
it.
sake,
Sure.
because they're both kind of place and time compilations by the put out by pretty iconic record labels and sort of documenting, yeah, just a snapshot of the communities around that record label at those times. And the first of the two is 1990's State of the Union compilation on Discord Records,
Awesome.
which, you hear, when you think like DC, like the DC music scene is one of those ones that's been like, a well documented scene, and it's been considered like one of the big, more influential ones for sure. And it's definitely had some like distinct eras. And you think of like the Flex Your Head era, and then after that you think of like sort of the Nation of Ulysses, Fugazi, like that kind of era in the 90s. And
Yep.
there's sort of there's like a whole other section kind of in the middle of that that I feel like doesn't get as much coverage, that State of the Union really sort of takes a picture of.
Can you be more
And it was a
specific
benefit.
there in terms of what it brings?
Well, it came out in 1990, and it's kind of like, it's like that bridging era. Like,
Okay.
there's an early Fugazi song on it, recorded as a 3-piece before Guy Picciotto was in the band. And then there's a song by One Last Wish, which was the band that Guy had between Rites of Spring and Fugazi.
They're awesome.
And like, there's like a late Scream song that's just like a remix. And a song by Ignition, you're talking about Void. That's like, Ignition was another Alec McKay band. He's also in Hammered Hulls now. Actually, yeah, their song Anger Means is like one of my favorite sort of DC punk songs of that era. And then it's got bands like Soul. It's kind of like, I guess, when you hear people talk about like the Revolution Summer era in DC, it's like, it was kind of like, this is like that kind of, some of the bands around that, yeah, like Ignition and Soulside, who actually just got back together and put out a new LP this year. And like, yeah, One Last Wish, like early Fugazi. There's some really early Shudder to Think. Christ on a Crutch, which features Nate Mendel of Foo Fighters. Their song Off Target is pretty great. And yeah, then just some bands like Kingface, who were kind of like almost like a weird jam rock band that snuck in there, because I'm sure they were just like people's friends. And like Fire Party, who, they were like another Discord band that put out a couple records but never really sort of caught on. But yeah, it was like a benefit for different like sort of, I think, like homeless charities around DC. And yeah, just kind of like, I bought it on cassette at Backstreet Records sometime in the 90s, used. And it was one of those, like, yeah, it was just like, I wasn't as familiar with that whole era of music coming out of Washington, D.C. at the time. And it was cool to just sort of get a little, like, I love the Ignition song, like, on this compilation. Anger Means, like, it's like one of my, like, probably, like, top 30 favorite punk songs, at least. Like, and yeah, like, I wasn't that familiar with Scream. So it was cool to hear one of their songs, even though it isn't really a normal. Actually, their original drummer just passed away, I guess. But
Dave Grohl is dead?
Not Dave Grohl, but the guy that played drums before Dave Grohl.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they do have a new record coming out.
They do, and I know Dave Grohl is on it as at least a featured player.
Right.
And the other kind of place and time compilation that I picked from like what I consider a pretty iconic record label is the XXX Some Ideas Are Poisonous compilation on Ebullition Records that came out in 1995, which I will show. I don't know if the camera can see here. I have basically the album cover of the three sort of X's, like that was the first tattoo that I got, when I was during my time as a straight edge hardcore enthusiast in the mid 90s.
Awesome.
And like in a band with a tattoo artist. But anyways, this was the first release. This and the Los Crudos Spitboy split LP were the first two things I bought on Ebullition from Phil Clark's old distro 2%.
Much respect. Yeah,
exactly. And it was the first thing Ebullition ever released on CD. though it was packaged and originally packaged in LP. The CD was packaged in an LP sleeve,
Oh.
because kind of like the Peace compilation, there was a big booklet that came out with it. Because because it's an Ebullition release, there had to be a long, angsty sort of personal essay on straight edge and what it means, and how it's not just about hanging out with your bros and kicking people in the face in the pit and yada yada yada. And a lot of people do it for different reasons. And the original spirit behind the compilation was just for the guy who ran Ebullition Records, Kent McLeod, identified as straight edge, but he didn't really like a lot of the stuff that was considered straight edge hardcore at the time, and went and found a bunch of other bands whose members all considered themselves straight edge or sober or whatever. Decided to put out this compilation, sort of putting together just like a pretty diverse sort of spattering of bands for the scene. It's like not a lot of them had a whole lot of releases. Like Groundwork from Arizona had, they had a couple records on Ebullition as well. And like Frail, which is the band that some of the folks from Ink and Dagger, who were a pretty great band from Philadelphia in the 90s, that briefly featured comedian Eric Wareheim on bass.
Cool.
Some of the other non-Eric Wareheim folks, Frail was their previous band. Also, there's a pretty great band from Albany, New York that I actually got to see live once, Monster X, who were at the time the self-proclaimed world's only straight edge grindcore band. But we're like, pretty
That's a
fun.
bold claim.
Yeah, and like they kind of like mixed both lanes sort of in their own way, and they're fun and there's some nice guys. And I got to see them play at a weird VFW hall across the road from a shooting range in Albany, New York one time, and it was a blast. But some of the other bands on it are Policy of Three, who had some pretty great records at that time, and also Portraits of Past, Endeavor, who were a little more on the more metal side of things, but and like I said, like some of these bands, not all the bands are necessarily the most memorable, but at the time it was like this record meant a lot to me. And it seemed like a pretty, like I said, another snapshot of just like bands at that time as part of that whole like Ebullition Records kind of like quote unquote emo, type hardcore scene that were, identified as straight edge or whatever, but weren't, stereotypically straight edge and didn't sound like Youth of Today or that kind of thing. And, when I was a younger person that was very into that scene like that, like I said, this record meant a lot to me. I got a tattoo of the X's from the cover, at the time. Like, it was a big deal. So I had to include it as one of my picks as well.
Man, that's awesome. And I guess first of all, before I think, we're not overly pressed for time. In fact, I think we can actually each do one more anyway. If we want to just kind of ram in a few referentially as well. But this actually, Dan, when I was preparing the notes in advance for a change for this episode, one thing that occurred to me is we could easily do part 2 of this.
Oh, for sure.
Like easily. And I got some pretty specific reasons for that. But looking back now, because we're actually at 13/14 episodes or something, we've been doing this for just about a year almost. I checked, and we did the first episode actually in December. So considering how haphazardly we kind of have our output set, I mean, we actually have been pretty productive in terms of getting this out on a semi-regular basis, even considering, my family and moving and whatever hiatus that kind of occurred over the summer and is still to an extent in play. So, I mean, I just think, man, good for us for kind of putting it out there to the 5 or 6 or however many folks out there. But the nice thing is it's out there for posterity. So in terms of like just riffing off of what you were saying in terms of the Ebullition records, I remember very distinctly they did it a second one, right? They did like a vinyl comp that came out.
Yeah.
And Shopmaker was on it. That's my biggest thing, and I remember getting that. That probably would have been among my first purchases from from Phil/2%. And I guess the other aspect of that is just what you were speaking to, about the hard, about the straight edge stuff. I would say, like, as far as musical genres generally, friggin' that level of hardcore from the 1990s really well relative to other, kind of contemporary musical fads. Like, I mean, you can't say
sure.
this about new metal. You can't say this about, in terms of guitar music that you can look back on favorably. Is like, it was awesome then. It remains awesome because it's just, it fulfilled exactly what it needed to do on pretty much its own terms, right? So Ebullition is one of those things that I didn't catch on much of, but the parts of it that I did were friggin' rad. And the guy, the person, it's down to one person with a Facebook page, but he's still like reissuing some of this stuff.
Oh, for sure.
And it's worth following along because it's just really, And the one that I was going to do, but I want to be able to hold on to it and speak to it as I do, it was All the President's Men. Right? And I think I might even have spoken to that on, some previous episodes, tangentially. But that's a really good one, right? And as much as it's got, you're talking about Policy of Three, talking about the Shopmaker. And some really interesting Shopmaker news is that they actually have a new reissue.
I saw that.
It's like a curated reissue. Like it's not like it's not like they're taking Crayon Club or Mouse Ear and putting that out again. It's more like they're pulling from that to create like a 2-record set, I want to say. So at least probably 20-ish or 25 songs spread out in such a way that they're curated. I think they may have some alternate versions. They may have some live aspects in there as well. The Shopmaker official Instagram has been going pretty, regularly, at least as long as I've been on Instagram, which isn't really long at all. But and Sean S. Callan, the photographer, the Ottawa photographer.
Yes.
He operates a Discogs. He operates as kind of a show promoter, I think. He actually, like, I ended up purchasing like 30-second motion picture, or something off of him, like the post Shopmaker bands and whatever off of Discogs. And he so it's got some of his awesome photography in there. So I guess just now I'll just really end things with something that's quite tangential, and I got some more that'll just be in the mix. But okay, Punk Rock Halloween Volume 2.
Okay,
is what I got in my hands, and I got this entirely because it's got actually, like, it's better than it ought to look. Based on its looks, because it's got like friggin' Johnny Thunders on here, MDC, who you mentioned earlier, the Queers are on here, Down by Law, the Vandals. Like, in terms of, like, you could actually do a whole episode just on punk Christmas music, believe it or not. You want to do like a deep dive on the Bad Religion does Christmas music and the like. But the thing that got me to purchase this is because it's got Ship Thieves doing a cover of a some 70s I Think of Demons. It's like this 70s, like, just mainstream whatever song that happens to be about murder. And Chris Waller, Ship Thieves, as well as Hot Water Music, obviously. But, I got a Ship Thieves tattoo from their last record, right? So I just think anything that guy does is dope. And as per the Instagram, Hot Water Music have just finished recording new music. And that's likely coming out next year to coincide with their touring in support of their 30th anniversary. So there, I rammed in as many things as I could there. Dan, what do you?
All right. So yeah, one of my picks that I'll save for the notes for the most part, but I'll just sort of I was going to pick the Raucous Records Sound Bombing Volume 2 compilation, because I feel like, the label sampler as a compilation idea is like something that deserves more time to talk on than I
Absolutely.
really can spend at the moment. But my other pick is one that just celebrated a 30th birthday recently. That compilations can be a lot of different things. Movie soundtracks are definitely a type of compilation, and one of my favorite movie soundtracks, in terms of like enjoyment of the soundtrack over just like even like nobody gives a shit about this movie. No one, like, I think I saw part of it once, but I don't think
Is it
anyone has
Repo
ever.
Man?
No. Oh man, Repo Man. I love Repo Man actually, but no. I'm talking about 1993's Judgment Night original soundtrack compilation.
Oh my God! Awesome.
Which, if you're not familiar with the movie itself, it's like Emilio Estevez, Stephen Dorff, Jeremy Piven, and Cuba Gooding Jr. witness a drug deal gone bad and have to like run home through like the alleys of Chicago or something. But like
And Cuba Gooding
somebody,
Jr.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's like just for whatever, like just nothing of a movie like that is like the Immortal Records, who released the soundtrack, they somehow managed to get just like some of the top like alternative rock bands of the time and some of the top hip hop acts of the time to collaborate on like what's all in all a very solid collection of songs, and in some cases like some of my favorite songs by those artists. And it's 11 tracks. There was a 12th song recorded and scrapped that has never been released, which was actually Tool and Zach De La Rocha doing a song together apparently, and it just was like garbage and they all hated it, and it just never worked out, so it's never seen the light of day. But yeah, it's like Helmet and House of Pain collaborating, and yeah, Teenage Fan Club and De La Soul, their song Fallen, like I said, is like one of my favorite things by both bands.
Right.
And like Living Color and Run DMC, Sonic Youth and Cypress Hill, Sir Mix-a-Lot and Mudhoney for the the Seattle collection. Pearl Jam and Cypress Hill are on there twice. They have a song with Pearl Jam and a song with Sonic Youth. Biohazard and Onyx, who had actually worked together previously, because Onyx did a remix. They did a metal remix of their song Slam, and had Biohazard on it doing backup vocals and like the guitar parts and stuff. And also a song they did, and Slayer and Ice-T actually do a 3-song Exploited medley. Yeah, covering they changed UK 82 to LA 92, and then covered the song War and the song Disorder, just as like a 5-minute medley. But like when I was younger, I may or may not have been at sort of an outdoor event where people may have taken over, just sort of set stuff up and taken over a commercial street in Victoria with, it's like part of like a, demonstration sort of thing, but with a DJ playing music the whole time. And at one point, just before things got really intense and everyone had to run from the police, the DJ played the Ice-T and Slayer song from this soundtrack. And it was just like, that was like the, oh my God, we have to run moment. Allegedly, possibly never, in theory, if this would have happened. But yeah, so that song has, pretty sentimental value in my heart as well. But yeah, just back to back. It's 11 songs, all pretty great. Like Dinosaur Jr. and Del the Funky Homo Sapien together is like, I can only imagine what that recording session was like. But yeah, like it's just
of smoke, I think, for them. But,
exactly, and it's just like it's one of those things that like it's a lot of people it's their appreciation of it is at least ironic. But you know, if you sit down, like I've bought probably, I think I have 2 copies of this right now, just because like if I would see it at Value Village or something, I'd pick up a copy. You know, if it was like $1 or whatever, just to make sure. And I've definitely got a couple of them like sitting in a storage bin, like in the room over there, kind of thing.
That's why it's worth paying for a streaming service on your music provider.
Yeah.
Like that's like $10 a month for Apple or
Oh, I do.
and
But
that's just like download, and I would just be listening to that all the time on my device.
Oh, for sure.
That's like part of the value of those kind of. Man, and not to cut you off, but
But no, that's like that's my. I'll leave it there. But yeah, that is that was my last pick, just because like it's just such a solid, and it's a solid collection of songs back to back, and like it just celebrated its 30th birthday, So yeah, all the more reason to And I picked it actually. I put that on my list. I'd put that and Peace Comp on my list, and then I saw a bunch of people posting about the Peace Comp in relation to the singer from that band Giesem passing away, and that being that record being their introduction to his work. And then right afterwards it was like, oh, happy 30th birthday Judgment Night soundtrack. And it's like, well, these are some timely picks indeed. But yeah, we could easily do like a compilations part 2, like, and we'll have to put that on the slate sometime.
Well, I mean, every comp worth its salt, really did, hopefully, at least in terms of these label ones, get into more than one edition, right? When they're
exactly.
Kids today, I learned that there's such a person or there was such a person as the Japanese Gigi Allen. So, as an educator, I'm going to sort of put a pin in that as. If I ever
like I said, with with less feces and more violence, like.
yeah, that's pretty downright. Like, it's like I see Gigi's records on the thing at even like friggin' at the mall record store, the chain Sunrise Records or whatever, and it's like, man, I want to love it and I want to pick it up and buy it, but I just every time I think of it, I'm just like. I'm thinking of a friggin' demented person covered in shit, and really living his truth. But like, do I want to friggin', dive into that and envision that and live with that? I'm like, no, I'm too much of a pansy. I'm too much of a pansy at this point for Gigi Allen, at least at this point in my life. So
I'll still listen to the Jabbers album, which is like. That was his early work when he still had hair and kept his pants on, I believe, most of the time, and like sang. And it's more just kind of like snotty power pop. I mean, it's definitely got some of he doesn't fully explore some of the themes he would later on in his, other albums, but like, it's just sort of like snotty, not giving a fuck kind of power pop stuff. That's not too bad. That like it's worth checking out on a stream. Yeah, like I'll listen to that on a streaming service at least. But like, yeah, I can understand not wanting to take that up to the counter and like put the money.
I just like it's just like I can order it if I wanted to. It's just more like,
but do you want to?
Do I have the bandwidth in my increasingly shrinking, diminishing middle-aged life to dive into that? Like,
that's
at some point, but not quite now. Or
so. I feel like that's a younger person's game, like.
Yes, and kill all the young people except for my friends. So, dude, it's been a pleasure.
All right,
I think the StreamYard thingy is it's held out. There haven't been any overt drops in the network, so it's as a visual experience, it'll be less than optimal. But I think in terms of the audio, the audio has actually been relatively stable within the platform. So I'm actually due at this point to do the quote unquote professional-ish and academic-ish one here. 10 minutes, and I want to refill my Spider-Man full of instant coffee and vegan soy, on top of it. A poor man's Starbucks, if you will. Yeah, man. So I guess I'll just say adios for now.
All right.
People in the notes and whatnot. And Dan, it's a pleasure as always. And take care, everybody.
All right. Thanks. See you around.